Hello, my name is Denara McLeod, and this is my module summary 5. So this is the way that my module will be delivered, and you can take a look at that. So for Chapter 11, there's a lot of information about social emotional development, and it also talked about Erikson's theory of the psychosocial development being the elements of what as a individual you must face in order to move on to the next level of development. So the first stage would be trust versus mistrust. The second would be autonomy versus shame and doubt. The third one would be initiative versus guilt. And the fourth one would be industry versus inferiority. And the fifth one would be identity versus role confusion. It also, for the slideshow, it talked about Freud's psychoanalytic theory dealing with the id, ego, and superego, as well as the 5 stages of the psychosexual development. There's a huge topic of attachment in the book. It dealt with the process of attachment and attachment in relation to age, so from infancy to the child age, the middle age, to adolescence. And then it also talked about the various types of attachment in relation to culture, and then the attachments that are made throughout life. So there can be more than just one attachment. Like it was primarily just attachment with the mother until it turned out to be attachment with people that are providing care to the child. So there's more than just one attachment when a child is born. And then it also talks about the attachment throughout life. And then it had a lot of information about emotions, and then it talked about factors that may influence emotions, so being gender, culture, and social economic status. And then talked a lot about, for the slideshow that you provided for the class, it talked about emotional intelligence, and these are the concepts of EQ being motivating yourself, persistence when frustrated, impulse control, delay of gratification, identifying one's own feelings, and then being able to identify others' feelings, regulation of mood and emotions, and then empathy. Also talked about in the book the idea of emotional regulation, being that once the development of emotional regulation has been successful, then that is led up to social competence, which is in relation to social regulation. And then we also talked in the book, it talked about temperaments and talked about Mary Rothbert's study that suggested that there are particular temperaments that emerge in children's brains, dependent on distinctive capacities for responding to impulses in regulating attention, emotions, and activity. And she has 3 dimensions of temperament, being extroversion, which is the idea of being optimistic, laughing and smiling a lot, and being a sensation seeker. And then negative affectivity, so being shy and often fearful, feelings of frustration, sadness, uncomfortable, and not being easy to soothe is the second temperament. And then the third temperament is the effortful control, so being proficient in focusing and shifting attention. Also, planning for the future, just suppressing inappropriate responses, and taking pleasure in novel stimuli. And then in the book, it did talk about personalities. It talked about, what kind of things can affect personality, and like what goes on when you are like during each age stage, like what's to be looked for in personality. And then it talked about what kind of things influence personality, and those influences would be gender, culture, and then ethnicity. It also talked about how to support children with adolescence, or how to support children and adolescents with emotional challenges, because people who may experience emotional challenges may experience depression, anxiety disorder, and conduct disorder. It's important to give people who have these challenges support. So these are some of the ways that you can give support. So, showing interest in the well-being of an individual, teaching, social skills to cope with their challenges. And then for individuals that experience high levels of anxiety, providing extra structure for those individuals so that it will reduce their levels of anxiety. And then setting reasonable limits of behavior, giving children a sense of control, because everybody likes a sense of control, because it, leaves them not stressed out. So it's important to give them a sense of control. And then any concerning behaviors or needs of the child needs to be advised to parents. And then, just being attentive for signs that an individual may be contemplating suicide. What I learned from chapter 11 would be Mary Rothbert's ideas of the 3 dimensions of temperaments. This is the first time I've ever seen her work, so it was really interesting to me, because I've been told that all kids have different temperaments due to many factors of the environment, social interactions, and prenatal development. So being able to, give each temperament an actual name, rather than just saying, oh, they have a mild temperament, or oh, they have a troubled temperament. It's better to just use these kind of the description she gave for identifying temperaments, being the extroversion, negative affectivity, and effortful control. And I feel, as someone who works with children, I've already been using, ways to identify temperaments, but now I have an actual name for the temperaments that I see when I'm working with children. So I can definitely use her her 3 ideas of temperaments, and actually giving each temperament that I see with children an actual name. So that's what I'll be doing with the knowledge, the new information that I got from chapter 12. Okay. So chapter 12 talked about the sense of self, which is a very important concept. And the purposes of sense of self help children understand things that are happening to them. And then they also motivate them to engage in behaviors where others, such as peers, adults, whoever, might respond to them appropriately. And then this helps them make choices that are appropriate for the goals that they set for themselves. And then they also, with the sense of self, they develop a positive, you want them to develop a positive sense of self-worth. And then it talked about, in the PowerPoint, the I self versus the me self. So the I self is the idea of being separate from the surrounding world and having the ability to control thoughts and one's thoughts and actions. Then the me self is the more sense of personality, being like pinpointing what makes oneself unique, being physical, material, or social characteristics. And then also having that sense of self as objects of a knowledge and evaluation. And then it also talked about gender, and ethnicity and culture having an effect on, the sense of self. Oops. And then it also talked about the theory of mind, which, I'll talk about a little bit later on in this presentation. And then also talked about the perspective of others, so understanding others. There are many ways to do so. You can use a theory of mind to understand others. People use biases, people use stereotypes and prejudice, and the stereotypes and prejudice bias aren't the best way to understand people because they have a negative connotation to them. But those are common ways that people use to understand each other. What I learned from this chapter was, the theory of mind. Um, I was confused when I watched the video of Theory of Mind, but after I read the book, I was able to have a much better understanding of the concept. So basically, theory of mind is a way of understanding people's mental and emotional states. So being, beliefs, intentions, motivations, and values. So theory of mind is used to understand those. I do like theory of mind because it helps me understand how people understand others. And I think it's really important that, you know how you understand people and that you understand how other people understand other people or yourself. And I can definitely use this in my practice when working with kids by giving children the skills to try to be understanding of others so that everyone can feel understood and accepted rather than using stereotypes and prejudices. Thank you.